what are some of the superlatives that we have drawn up for you preseason now ahead of the glorious thing that is the college football season in 2024? More specifically, we're going to focus on the SEC because we're obviously at SEC Media Days. And I want to start with this one. Who has the greatest expectations in 2024? Now, the obvious ones, you say, well, JD, at Bama, expectations are always high. You say at Georgia, expectations are always high. I think at Ole Miss, I don't remember the last time expectations were this high. To put it in perspective now, Ole Miss has better odds to make the college football playoff than the Alabama Crimson Tide. If you told me that this time last year, I'd say, oh my gosh, what happened to Nick Saban? Jackson Dart, we talked to him yesterday as well. We got that interview banked in for you, and we'll air that at a later date. That'll be a lot of fun. But I'm just saying, man, Ole Miss, with what they have at quarterback, with who they have at head coach, with what they did last season, and all the guys they bring back from last season. And then on top of that, the portal entries you've heard me talk about ad nauseum at this point. Like they have, and Lane Kiffin said this yesterday during his time with the media, they have a different looking operation when they get off the bus to play a football game. They got more dudes that resemble what Georgia has, what Alabama has. Now, do they have enough to win at the level they want to in 2024? Remains to be seen. But the expectations for Ole Miss, from where I'm sitting, are as high as they've been in recent memory. One more thing I'll say about Ole Miss. Expectations are earned. Pressure is privilege. Like all these things that we're talking about with Ole Miss right now, like they have earned the right to be in these discussions, to compete for the SEC championship and compete for a college football playoff berth. If you make the college football playoff, I don't think that's where the expectations stop for Ole Miss. I think they have to at least win a game when they get to that dance. So Ole Miss, greatest expectations, I believe, within the SEC if we're using the measuring stick of what is relative to previous expectations out there in Oxford. Here's a fun one. Now, I told y'all it's not going to be your standard most likely to succeed, although we have one of those on here as well when it comes to our superlatives. Most likely to beat punchline culture. Now, if you're just now tuning in, welcome. It's college football, nothing but college football. But punchline culture is a term we use a lot on this show relative to how social media perceives things going on in the college football sphere. Because we live in a day and age now where Twitter is, I mean, if Twitter was an Olympic sport, I think America would win gold every single year, probably would sweep the podium, to be honest with you. And that's great. I'm all for some Twitter banter, and I'm all for a good joke on Twitter. But punchline culture has put us into this world where everyone is so quick to make a joke, to get a punchline, to have the upper hand on their counterparts on Twitter with something funny they said. And that's great, but also it leaves out context. It leaves out common sense. It leaves out allowing things to bake a little bit. And I think right now, the most likely team to beat punchline culture, in my mind, is Florida. Because right now, y'all, you check the Twitter sphere, it's rough out there for Florida. It is. People are saying Sunbelt Billy that. Florida's going to miss a bowl game this. And we've said this for a long time on this show, but we're saying it again at SEC Media Days. I think we keep using the wrong equation for Florida, man. I do. Shouts to Florida, man, if you're out there. I think we keep using the wrong equation for Florida, going back to my point here. We keep using the equation that last year's record of 5-7 plus the Hunger Games kind of schedule they're going to play in 2024 equals their 2024 outlook. And while that's not an irresponsible take, people have run with that thought and said, well, they were 5-7 last year. They're going to be even worse this year because of what they have in front of them. And we're totally ignoring everything that's going on with that team in Gainesville, Florida right now. We're totally ignoring that Graham Mertz had a really good year last year. We're totally ignoring they got him more weapons. We're totally ignoring that defense from a roster talent level should be much more improved. And so all those things combine to me to say, okay, get your jokes off while you want to right now. Make sure you get your punchlines out there while you have a chance right now. But I'm telling you, the punchline culture, when it comes time for 2024 to actually happen in the games to be played, I think Florida is about to beat the brakes off punchline culture. I am not calling my shot for Florida to win the SEC. I am not calling my shot for Florida to be a college football playoff team. But I have called my shot that they will make a bowl game and they will make somebody look a little bit silly when it comes time for them to play those big games in November. Another superlative here for you. Listen, we are very grateful and fortunate to do this for a job. Talk about college football every single day. To study college football for a living. Like people will have conversations with, and they'll say, well, how did you know that guy's name or this guy's name? And I'm like, it really comes down to how much time we have on our hands to give to this profession and give to the sport. So that's one. But at the same time, I'll be the first to admit there's a lot I don't understand about the 2024 college football season. There's a lot that I just don't know quite yet. And I think the team that I most don't understand is Missouri in the SEC. I don't know what to think. Because on one hand, they were awesome last year, right? They won double-digit football games. They beat Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. Luther Burns back. I don't know how he's not the best player or the best wide receiver, rather, in College Football 25, the video game, after using him last night on College Football 25. Brady Cook is back, looking to build off another big season. The defense was great last year. So all these things are on one side of the equation. On the other side, though, you lose a lot of production on defense from last year's squad. You lose your defensive coordinator from last year's squad. As good as you feel about your running back room this year in Columbia, you don't have Cody Schrader on that roster. And so you take all those things, and then on top of that, you look at last year's record and the run they went on. Yes, you won double-digit ball games, but 4 of those ball games that you won were by 1 score. And I am all for winning by 1 score. I mean, if you had to win every single game by 1 score, shouts to Washington. Get it done. Get it done. Like, it doesn't matter if you win by 1 point or 100 points. A win is a win. But at the exact same time, if we're trying to project what they're going to be next season, I don't know. Because I don't know if you can bottle up 1-score victories and have them translate to the next season with those things that they lose. So I'm not telling you they're going to be bad. I'm not telling you they're going to win the SEC. I'm telling you, I quite frankly have the worst gauge for what they're going to be in 2024. The team that I most don't understand is Missouri. So keeping in this theme of understanding and not understanding, I think the team that's probably the most misunderstood across the SEC in 2024, there's 2 teams. The first one for me is South Carolina. Remember what we were saying this time last year about Shane Beamer and co? Remember all the talk around, hey, are they a dark horse to get to Atlanta? Is Spencer Rattler a dark horse to potentially be in New York for the Heisman Trophy ceremony? Because they finished the year so hot. Had 2 top 10 wins. They beat Clemson and Tennessee. They come into this season. And, to be honest, let's call a spade here. They had some bad luck. Now, bad luck is part of college football. Injuries are part of college football. And South Carolina had their fair share. Juice Wells wasn't available for a lot of the year. Your best offensive weapon. We're dinged up across the offensive line, and it showed multiple times throughout SEC play. We were at the Tennessee game, and, they could not give Spencer Rattler more than 2 Mississippis to throw the football. They had issues. And so you take last year and all the things that went wrong that, quite frankly, Shane Beamer can't control, and now we're having hot seat conversations about Shane Beamer? This is the same guy that this time last year we were talking about how he had overachieved his previous 2 seasons. So if you're going to overachieve 2 years in a row and you have 1 year where you underachieve with some things that, quite frankly, are not in your control, I think it's okay for us to give it a little bit more time. To me, the hot seat talk around Shane Beamer feels foolish. The other thing I'd say here, too, he's done a great job adding quarterbacks. Spencer Rattler got him through the portal, had a lot of success at South Carolina in spite of what they didn't have around him. Look who you have this year playing quarterback for you. 4-star cat Lenora Sellers. At On 3, we had Lenora Sellers as a top 10 quarterback when he came out of high school. If you're talking about acquiring talent at the most important position in football, Shane Beamer's done that at a high level to this point. Now, it hasn't been, a home run every single time he's been there. I understand that, but the fact he's acquired talent at the quarterback position, I think, deserves some recognition as well. So I think South Carolina is a bit misunderstood. Other team that I think is misunderstood in the SEC is Auburn. Because there's the New Mexico State part of things that happened last year, which punchline culture is having a field day with. And God bless them. You're entitled to your opinion. But you also have to give the proper amount of attention to, in my mind, what they did against Georgia, what they did against Alabama. I understand the home field advantage. That's massive. But I think a lot of people are seeing the record at Auburn last year and just sort of mailing in what they're going to be this upcoming season. And I've said this for a while now. I think Peyton Thorne, what you saw last year, was like diet Peyton Thorne. It wasn't the real thing that you're going to get this upcoming season. One, because of him not getting spring football. And we've said that now probably for a record number of times on this podcast and on this show. People that watch this show know I feel that way. But also, I think the clear direction they're going to have now with Hugh Freeze and the weapons they have on offense from Cam Coleman to Keandre Lambert-Smith, that's going to be massive. Rivaldo Fairweather last season was Auburn's leading receiver. Now, Rivaldo Fairweather is going to be first-team All-NFL Combine when it's his time, just in terms of how he's built, the eye test, all those things. Like, he is a freak show. But if he's your leading receiver, you have problems at receiver. And so for Auburn going forward now, the way that they've sort of mended that, and I think the way they're trending, we got out there this past spring, and y'all, it's hard to define, it's hard to quantify. It felt different. It felt like as an organization, the way that they handled business from spring practice to the way that the building ran, like it felt like an organization that was ahead of just the year 2 they're going into. Like it felt like a year 4, year 5 kind of operation. So I trust Hugh Freeze. I trust Auburn. I understand the hesitancy around Peyton Thorne, but I think there's a little bit of misunderstanding there around both Auburn and South Carolina. Now, here's a fun one, man. Most likely to have a Coke and Mentos situation on their hand. And those of y'all that have watched YouTube for a long time and Googled Coke and Mentos, you know what I'm talking about, or searched Coke and Mentos, you know what I'm talking about. Those of y'all that have tried this experiment, you know what I'm talking about. When you put the candy Mentos into a Coke bottle, it creates a chemical reaction that is similar to an atomic bomb. Like, I mean, it blows up. And I think that's Tennessee this year. And the obvious is Nico, right? Nico Iamaleava, all his physical tools. He was the number 1 player for us coming out of high school in the class of 2023. He's gifted. I mean, he can run. He's got great size. Got a rocket for an arm. I was really impressed going to see him in spring practice, the way he throws on the run. You pair that with the quantity of weapons they have in Knoxville. I've said many times, I think that's massive. I think their offense will be much more improved than they were a season ago. And then you pair that with what they have on defense. Like, say what you want about the offense they have this season. If you go out and score 40-ish a game, or you go have just a tremendous offensive output like you had in 2022, y'all, you've seen that movie before where you have a great offense, the defense can't hold up there into the bargain. I don't think that's the situation this year in Knoxville. I think the offense will be potent. I think the defense may not be one that's going to be, top of the SEC, but I think it's one of those defenses you can probably put a little bit of pressure on. You can lean on them a little bit. It's not this sprained ankle kind of defense where you got to be on crutches with your offense and, don't ask anything of that ankle. Don't ask anything of that defense. If you ask that defense to win a game for you, they can't do it. I think this defense has got a lot more under the hood, and for that reason, Tennessee could blow up and be a college football playoff team. Would not surprise me in the slightest. Given what Vegas thinks about them preseason, I believe their win total is right at 9.5. Vegas thinks they could be a college football playoff team as well, because that number, I think, to get in the dance is going to be right around 10-2 for an SEC team. So Tennessee, to me, Coke and Mentos is a superlative you use for them going into 2024. So we look at the SEC. Here's another superlative. Who is most treated like old takeout? Now, we're here in Dallas, and we're, quite frankly, eating a lot of our meals out in the great city of Dallas. And when you finish your meal, if you have some leftovers, you take it back to the room or back to your house, you put it in the fridge, you leave it in the back of the fridge for a while. And if it was really good, maybe you go and get it for lunch the next day. But oftentimes, man, what happens to those takeout boxes? They sit back there for a day, 2 days. If you're really irresponsible like me, sometimes they stick around for the better part of a week or two. And so all that's to say is, like, who are we forgetting in the SEC right now? And I think the team that maybe isn't being forgotten being the right word, but the team that needs maybe a little bit more juice to them preseason is LSU. Because LSU now, everybody looks at the defense and says, oh, hey, they're far away, man. You lost 3 first-round draft picks on offense. I don't know where LSU's at. And it's fair to see what's on paper and have questions, because it's hard to lose that much on offense and to have that on defense coming back and be like, okay, yeah, we're going to go win it all. But I don't think anyone's saying they're going to win it all right now in Baton Rouge. I just think they need a little bit more R-E-S-P-E-S-H-M-E-T, to quote Michael Scott. I think it's irresponsible for us to also assume that the defense is going to stay where they are because of who they brought in Blake Baker to be the new DC out there, because of who they have at quarterback in Garrett Nussmeier, who we talked to yesterday. I'm going to show you that conversation a little bit later in this show. And because of the weapons they still have on offense. Kyron Lacey, C.J. Daniels, Mason Taylor, like, they got some dudes offensively now to where maybe you don't score 40 a game, but if you score north of 35, you're going to win a lot of ball games. And if that defense goes from being in a triple-digit total defense kind of operation to maybe like, let's say, top 50 total defense, which I don't think is totally irresponsible with Harold Perkins playing back there for you on defense at linebacker or wherever you want to play him. There's a lot more to LSU than I think what meets the eye, and I think a lot more respect that needs to be given to the Tigers out there. I'm just saying, keep an eye on them. I would not forget them like that old takeout. Now, here's a fun classic superlative we get a lot when it comes time for us to give these out. If you were a part of your senior superlatives in high school, there was like most changed from freshman to senior year. Most changed in the SEC right now is Alabama. And yes, the obvious is the head coach. You got Nick Saban no longer there, so it's Kalen DeBoer's show. You have 33% production returning on defense. You got some new pieces via the portal. But also, let's talk about the narrative that's changed for Alabama. Because I think it used to be they were the Death Star, they were the bad guys. They were the team that was very easy to dislike. You saw that script day a lot of times at the top of the preseason rankings. Oftentimes you saw that script day hoisting the national championship trophy when Nick Saban was there. I don't think that's the case anymore when it comes to Alabama. Not that they won't hoist hardware, they won't win national championships, but there's a question mark around Alabama for the first time in a while. And so I think with that being the case, there are some folks that see the way that Kalen DeBoer operates. They hear his story. Was at an NAIA school in Sioux Falls. He comes over from the West Coast. His conference blew up, so now he's in the SEC. I guess his old school went to the Big Ten, so it's hard to really give him too much of a hard time. But you hear the sentiment I'm saying here. Alabama, I think for the first time in a long time, is a lot easier to root for. Now, if you're a Tennessee fan or you're an Auburn fan, probably even if you're a Georgia fan, you're like, I will never root for Alabama. And that's fine. I mean, I'm not asking you to, but I think the overall college football public now is watching Alabama with a different lens. And so I think Alabama, both on paper, from the names on that roster and the nameplate on the head coach's office, and the narrative around them, I think, is most changed. Now, here's the most boring one, and we have to include it because it's just a must for when it comes to superlatives. Most likely to succeed. And I'll tell you what, I'll go back to my high school days. I went to high school with an individual named Jake Olson. And Jake Olson, before he graduated, had not one but two college game day pieces on his life. He had wrote a book. He had spoke around the country inspirationally, and he had told his story. Now, Jake Olson went blind in middle school. He ultimately ended up playing high school football for us, long snapping at Orange Lutheran, and then was set to go walk on at USC and long snap for the USC Trojans. And so you probably know his game day piece, his third game day piece that eventually aired when he snapped there. So the bottom line here is when it came time for most likely to succeed, nobody was holding their breath. We all knew it was about to be Jake Olson. Okay, so the same thing is true here. When it comes to most likely to succeed, it's it's not Alabama. It's Georgia and it's Texas. Got Alabama on the brain. Most likely to succeed, as boring as it is Georgia and Texas. And Texas, for me, say what you want about them having their first year in the SEC. Quinn Ewers is one of the best quarterbacks in college football. Steve Sarkisian has been to the college football playoff. That roster is in position, I believe, to compete day one in the SEC. And you say they lost Adonai Mitchell, they lost Xavier Worthy. That's true. Look at what they did in the portal. They didn't just land a couple of JUCO transfers, some FCS guys. They landed Isaiah Bond, proven commodity in the SEC. They went out and landed Silas Bolden, who I think is one of the best kept secrets in college football, Swiss Army knife at Oregon State. Like, they got some dudes now to replenish the production they had previously. So on paper, they can compete. And more importantly, the culture at Texas, I think, is more stable than it's ever been under Steve Sarkisian. People see the logo of Texas. They hear the Texas talking points preseason, and it's, oh, man, here we go again. That burnt orange Kool-Aid, here we go again. That's Texas for you. Maybe that was old Texas. That wasn't Steve Sarkisian's Texas. Steve Sarkisian, in the short time he's been there, has achieved at a really high level. He's got some accolades to his name. It's not just what they could be. They've done it now. They've won the Big 12 their last year in there. They've gone to the college football playoff. They've recruited at a high level. So all those things I believe are true of Texas that makes them, in my opinion, this year in 2024, most likely to succeed, right along with the Georgia Bulldogs. And Georgia now, again, it's boring. Yes, it's boring. It's a boring superlative to give out and a boring superlative, quite frankly, to achieve, because the roster, I think, is as good, if not better, than anyone else in college football. You got the best head coach in the sport. I would say pretty confidently today, I think you have the best quarterback in the sport. But here's the thing with Georgia that we've said for a while now that probably needs to be echoed as we sit here in media days about to jump into the 2024 season. The chip on their shoulder should scare everybody in the sport. Because it used to be, hey, got to defend the title. You gotta every single year for Kirby Smart, get in that team room and tell those guys they haven't done anything when a lot of those guys were on national championship squads. That's not this team. Carson Beck, he's never been the starting quarterback for a national title team. So this isn't an entitled group, and Kirby Smart is able to tell these guys, hey, you didn't get there last year. What are you going to do this year? That's scary for college football. I've talked about my expanded playoff take with Georgia, giving them a mulligan to let a 10-2 Georgia and 11-1 Georgia still into the dance with some motivation. It's dangerous. So Georgia, without question, one of the most likely to succeed teams in the SEC in college football in 2024. Hey, y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also, be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.